Welcome to the Ad Nauseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 180 of the podcast. Jeff, what was that?
What was that?
That was some new intro music.
Yes, I liked it.
Do you like it?
I was feeling it.
Yeah, that is from the fabulous guitarist, Mr. Jeff Sheets.
Jeff Sheets.
You like that guy's first name, don't you?
I do like his first. I like his last name too.
Yeah, so we're going to tell you a little bit more about him later on in the episode, but this is our friend Jeff Sheets. Never actually met him in person. Long-time social media acquaintance, and listeners of the podcast have heard his music on our Christmas episodes.
Oh, yeah. Man, you have all the connections. How do you know these guys?
I'm just trying to get ahead.
Man.
I just take a risk, you know? So Jeff very generously shared this song. The name of the song is Thrill Seeker.
That's apt.
Because the thrill is what? The thrill of studying the classics.
That's right.
How are you feeling, Jeff?
I'm feeling good. I am recently back from a little long weekend getaway.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Not a staycation, but a go-cation?
A go-cation, yes.
All right.
My family and I went down to the southern parts of Ohio.
Now, wait a minute.
Yes.
Don't you frequent the Graceland scene pretty often?
What? Are you talking about Memphis?
Yeah.
No, we were far north of Memphis.
Well, you said Ohio.
Yeah.
It's all Central America somehow, right?
Ohio is not Tennessee.
Okay. Keep going.
But we went to this wonderful place called Hocking Hills, which is very...
Oh, that's right.
It's not what you'd expect from... Well, I don't think it's what most people would associate with Ohio.
No, it's a lot of throat clearing, right?
Lots of throat clearing. But yeah, wonderful geology and hikes and waterfalls. It was absolutely gorgeous. And I was a little nervous because we didn't have the best weather. It was a little rainy. However, my wife and I think that kept a lot of people away.
Oh.
And on these hikes, you're under a canopy of forest. And so if anything, it made the waterfalls and rivers that much more impressive.
Nice.
It was great. It was fantastic.
So not different than when we have been in Greece and Italy in January.
Yeah, exactly.
The weather's nothing to write home about, but you don't have to fight the other tourists.
Exactly, right. We have those places to ourselves.
That's right.
Yep.
Well, that's great, Jeff. I'd like to hear more about that maybe a little bit later in the episode, because today the episode is... It's one I've been waiting to do a long time, really. It's about Catullus, Gaius Valerius Catullus, and his poem 101, which is a threnody on the death of his brother.
Right, heavy stuff.
So it's kind of heavy.
Yeah.
And out of respect, we have to find a way to handle that material well.
Dave, but before we dive into the darkness, I realized I did not ask how you're doing.
Oh, well, that's okay. You're a very thoughtful fellow. I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Observing an anniversary.
Yes.
Actually, just yesterday, and that was the passing of my mother.
Oh, that's right.
So it's been a year since that happened.
Wow.
And so this poem is really meaningful to me.
Sure.
The atque, Vale, hail and goodbye poem. So I'm doing well. When we were talking, thank you for asking, we were talking before the episode got started. We're talking about a professor. We won't mention his name, but... A professor that you knew, and you described him as a misanthrope.
I did.
And I said something like, well, but I'm kind of a misanthrope also.
Yeah.
And you said I was a different order of misanthrope.
Yes, you're a charming
That was the
misanthrope.
phrase.
That's a very important distinction.
Okay, so what's a charming misanthrope? I'm not fishing for compliments here, because I'd probably hate them anyway. But...
Well, I mean, I guess I could be wrong, but often when your misanthropy manifests, I detect a tongue slightly in cheek.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. But this professor that we're referring to,
no,
he hated the world.
His tongue was firmly sticking out at the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't really hate the world. I have trouble with people.
Right.
Yeah. In any event, I'm doing well. I'm so glad that we get to talk today about Catullus. And we're going to dive right in with this Neoteric poet. We have a lot of material to cover today. We're going to not let the episode run too long because in addition to the new music, we have a brand new sponsor.
Yes, we do.
And we are very excited to introduce her to our audience.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, as we get started, do you want to bring us, we got no shout out, do you want to bring us the opening quote?
Yeah, sure. So this comes from an article entitled "Catullus: A Pivotal Personality." I really enjoyed this article.
Yes,
right. It's a ways back. Classical Journal, 1930.
There was a different way of writing. It was more open and broad.
It was broad. I found it charming.
I did too.
Engaging. This was really quite good.
I'm not sure what's happened since then. I think perhaps the over-specialization of classics, it's become a little too focused.
It could be. It definitely kind of spoke about a different era.
I just like the guy's name.
This is it's Frank Debatin.
Debatin. It's a Debatin. It could be who knows, Debatin. I don't know, but I like Debatin a lot better.
Exactly.
And where is this from?
This is from the Classical Journal.
Okay.
Like we said, from 1930.
Yes, and I'm not to belabor it, but it's published by that association to which we both once belonged.
Yes, the CAMWS. The Classical Association of the Middle, West, and South.
Yeah. You've presented some papers at CAMWS, have you not?
I have several.
Yeah,
several
so have
times,
I.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
And it was always a bit of a mixed bag. I was always drawn to CAMWS. I looked to where is the conference?
Exactly.
First? I don't think I'm alone.
Knoxville, Charlottesville, Virginia. I've been up to the Pacific Northwest. We went to Oklahoma once.
We did,
right?
Oklahoma City, but
where the classists go sweeping across the plains.
Exactly.
Tucson.
We did Tucson,
Baton Rouge,
Cincinnati.
Yeah. A junket.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. But let me get into this article here. So this is from the beginning. And Mr. Debatin writes, when Quintus Valerius Catullus came from northern Italy to Rome, he was probably not over 22 years of age. When he died, he was probably not over 30. Into those 8 years, he crowded a vast amount of intense living, the writing of a small volume of highly sensitized and significant verse, and achieved a life that was apparently without any serious goal.
Can we pause there for a minute?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So he came to Rome at the age of 22.
Yes.
I think I previously said Gaius, but it's Quintus Valerius Catullus.
Yes.
And in 8 years, right, he packed a whole life into 8 years. And this last part here is something we might have to quibble with, right? And this has to do with the interpretation of Catullus. He achieved a life that was apparently without any serious goal.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How would we even know such a thing? Right?
Well, I think that pretty much what is happening to Catullus in this evaluation is that he is being compared to an epic poet like Virgil, right? Who has a lot of profound things to say about human nature and theology and human destiny and so forth. But as we get into it today, we'll see that Catullus has some profound things to say.
He does.
About human nature and these big issues as well.
Right. I mean, I wonder if part of this comes from, I don't think this is Debatin's take on Catullus.
No.
But because of the subject matter that the Neoterics tackled, it was a lot more personal.
You're right.
It was romantic. It was tragic. It was salacious.
Yes, very salacious. At times trivial.
Yeah.
Absurd.
So maybe from that, the interpretation, well, these aren't,
right.
It's so scattershot,
right,
that there's not an ultimate aim.
It's a person without a serious goal,
right?
Is what Debatin says.
But one of the huge problems with Catullus is we know so little about him.
You're right.
And any kind of biography is 99.9% drawn from his poetry.
That's right.
And that's always comes with a huge risk.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you continue here with Debatin?
Yes, I can. In these years, he burned out his life's flame in a conflagration of passion for a woman quite unworthy of devotion and fidelity, and he subjected his soul to tempestuous storms punctuated at intervals by nerve-shattered calm. The tangible result of all of which for the world and at large for Roman poetry in particular is to be found in 116 poems, some only 2 lines long, running the entire gamut of the emotions from joy and affection to desperate grief and disappointment. To these poems, an inventory of his estate would have added a villa, a worn-out yacht, some books, and no doubt some debts.
Isn't that like the Winkle biography right there?
Especially that worn-out yacht part.
Maybe an old aluminum canoe.
An old aluminum canoe, but
with a Mountain Dew can stuffed in the corner.
Exactly.
And some debts.
Yeah. His life had not been a long one, but it had probed man's experiences to momentary depths, and with a swirl passed from love to hate, from laughter to tears, from devotion to bitter hatred.
Yeah, that's nice.
That is really nice.
That's a good way to introduce the man.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So, in order to approach Catullus, we have to talk about this category that you already mentioned, and that is the category of the Neoteric poets.
Yes.
And Neoteric is a neoteros, a Greek term that means the young set, right?
Right.
And it's actually a phrase that was coined by Cicero, of all persons, to whom Catullus addresses one very famous poem.
Yeah.
And there's, I can't remember all of the details, but there is some outlandish flattery in that poem to Catullus, to Cicero, from Catullus, something like the wisest of all the sons of Romulus that have ever been, ever are, or ever shall be.
Right.
And you can't really tell, is he laying it on thick?
Yeah.
And mocking Cicero's pomposity, or is he a sincere admirer of the man's accomplishments?
And that's the rub, right?
That's right.
And when you're trying to kind of say concrete things about Catullus, you always run into that problem. I think even later in this article, Debate talks about that poem, and I think he speculates that we know that Cicero helped out one of Catullus' friends.
That's right.
Maybe defended him, maybe pro bono in court.
Yeah, a little financial help from
and this was a way of Catullus thanking him. That would be a straight reading of this.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, but thanking him, right? I'm going to make you famous by a little gentle mockery,
right?
Sarcastic wit. So the Neoteric poets, right? This was the young set. This is before the time of Virgil and Ovid, but it was after the archaic poets of the Republican era, you might say.
Right.
And sometime, Jeff, we're going to have to do an entire episode or two on the Neoteric poets.
Indeed, yeah.
But today we have to give just a little bit of a background so that the audience can appreciate some of the contrast with Poem 101, which is the one we're going to be talking about at length.
Yeah. Well, let's contextualize Catullus. So,
okay.
One of the many mysteries about him is that we don't know exactly the brackets of his dates, but
that's right.
The most commonly accepted are born sometime around 54, and then dies 30 years later.
That's right. Yep. So this is.
I'm sorry, no, that's not right.
Born 87.
Born 87 or 84, and then he dies sometime around 57 or 54. That's right.
Correct.
Okay, yep.
So I'm going to read here from Jean Biagio-Conte, right? This is page 142. And all throughout this book, Latin literature, we've talked about Conte so much.
Yeah.
But if you are a serious student of Latin literature, a listener, do yourself a favor and get this book and just read it. It's fantastic.
It's a must-have.
Yep. So he says, Gaius Valerius Catullus. Oh, that's where I got the Gaius. I see. So there apparently is some discrepancy even about the man's first name.
Quintus or Gaius. Yeah. Yep.
George Winkle, Jeffrey Winkle. Gaius Valerius Catullus was born at Verona in Gallia Cisalpina to a family that was well-to-do. Caesar was a guest in his house. Imagine that.
Yeah, he lived in interesting times.
Yeah, so first Caesar takes over the living room, then he conquers the bathroom.
Oh, man.
Then he's on the front porch.
Right. And he's talking about, all of the rumpus room is divided into 3 parts.
Exactly. Give it a rest, Caesar.
Right.
The date of Catullus' birth is not certain. Jerome, this would be the church father, who relies on Suetonius, places it in 87 BC and places his death 30 years later in 57. But the poet was certainly still alive in 55, as is proved by his references to events of that year.
Yeah.
Thus, along with the date of death, the date of birth too needs to be lowered so that we get something like 84 to 54.
There we go.
If the notice that he died at age 30 is true, otherwise we must suppose that he lived several years more than Jerome says.
So it's simply based on that in his poetry he mentions a political event
exactly
that we can securely date to 55.
That's correct.
So that becomes like the terminus postquem.
It's the terminus antequem. Yeah,
right. Exactly.
I always get those phrases.
So terminus antequem, he must have lived before that, and
right,
and then
he
died.
couldn't have lived after that.
Right.
Well, he could have, but we don't know.
We don't know. There's no other poetry that mentions anything later.
That's right.
Right. Okay.
So to contextualize that, you follow the March Madness, right?
I do.
And was it Florida that just won?
It did.
Okay.
Did you watch it? It was an amazing game.
No.
Oh, man.
Is that your team?
No. Well, I did pick them, but
okay.
I did.
You picked them to win?
I did.
Oh.
So I got that right, but I still lost in my
your bracket.
But I have no emotional attachment to the University of Florida.
Okay, they're Gators, right?
The Gators.
Right. So if we were reading your journal,
yeah,
right, 200 years from now, and you scribbled down, Gators won, all hope is lost, something like that.
Yeah.
We would have then a terminus.
Yes.
For you. You were alive at least that long.
At least that long.
Okay.
Yes. Right.
So there's the analogy. Conte continues. We do not know when Catullus arrived at Rome, but he knew and associated with people eminent in politics and literature, from the famous orator Hortensius Hortulus to the poets Cinna and Calvus, from Lucius Manlius Torquatus to the jurist and future consul Alfinus Varus, from Cornelius Nepos, famous historian, to Gaius Memmius. Now, Memmius was the gentleman to whom Lucretius dedicated the De Rerum Natura.
Was that right?
Yeah, the whole enchilada.
Yeah.
Says Conte, Catullus also had a love relationship with Clodia, the Lesbia of his poetry, who was almost certainly the half-sister of the tribune Publius Clodius Pulcher and the wife of Quintus Caecilius Metellus, the consul in 60. So we got to pause there for a moment.
Yeah.
Nobody can ever talk about Catullus without talking about Lesbia.
Right, of course. So this is so a number of poems are addressed to this mysterious Lesbia. And they run the gamut from just being head over the heels, riding the waves of passion, to the darkest despair about her interest in other men, and it's all over the map.
Yeah. Yes, the very famous line, "Vi vamus mea lesbia atque memus," let us live, my Lesbia, and let us love. And then at the end of that poem, the endless catalog of kisses, right?
Yes, exactly.
Give me 1,000,
right?
Then give me another 1,000, then give me another 1,000, then give me 300. And the way this was taught to me, and we want to talk about this a little bit as well, is I was told in graduate school and in my early encounters with Catullus that he may not have actually engaged in any of these amorous activities.
So this was just a pose?
Correct.
Yeah.
That he picked out a high society aristocratic woman. This would be the woman of Clodia, sister of Clodius, who was Cicero's sworn enemy.
Yes.
And then
the victim of a famous murder, too.
That's correct, by Milo, right?
Yeah.
And then he imagined, for the sake of a prurient public and a prurient audience, he imagined that he had an affair with her. And then he wrote poetry about it.
Right. Yeah.
Did you ever accept that interpretation, or do you take the other one?
I don't remember. I'm sure I encountered that somewhere along the lines. I mean, I remember having debates in class talking about the question: how serious do we take this, right? Is he just kind of putting on a romantic facade for the sake
persona
of his public,
right?
So those were never my favorite of his poems.
No,
I think today the kids would call Catullus a simp. If we read it,
really?
Right? Exactly right.
I've never understood that term.
He's
kind of doing anything for the woman's favor.
He's anything for the woman's favor, and in the second part of it this is a woman unworthy of that kind of favor.
I see.
Like Debatin says that he's throwing all of his affection towards a woman who doesn't deserve it.
Yeah.
Right.
So the late Princess Diana, right? I think she died in 97, 98.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
97, yeah.
A beautiful woman, much ballyhooed in the press, potentially the victim of paparazzi. I don't know what. But imagine an English poet, right, who had never met Diana, writing endless love poems to her for the purpose of getting the public's attention.
Yeah.
This is kind of how Catullus was presented to me.
Interesting.
That it may not have been that he actually knew Clodia.
Right. At the same time, it's very clear that he ran in the highest circles.
That's true.
Right. And so it wasn't just simply him, looking up at her window. I mean, I think maybe there was no affair.
I see.
But he would have met her. He would have known the family.
That's true.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful comment in one of Cicero's letters about Clodia, the Lesbia of the poems of Catullus, in which Cicero refers to Clodia as boaps, which means cow eyes.
Cow-eyed, yeah.
Or cow face, potentially. It's a Greek word, but we don't know whether he means it as an insult or as a compliment.
Well, yeah, I mean,
he could be saying she has, lovely bovine eyes, big dewy pools.
Right.
You ever looked into a cow's face?
It's mesmerizing.
Those wide set eyes, when they're not covered with flies, they can be quite mesmerizing.
That's right. Well, I mean, it's Homer's epithet for Hera. Right?
Exactly.
Ox-eyed or cow-eyed Hera.
Yeah, or dog face sometimes.
Yeah.
Kunopes for Helen.
Yes.
Which clearly is an insult, but boaps?
Boaps. I mean, yeah. Again, it's that two-edged thing. What's Catullus up to? Is he winking at us?
Right. Right. So you were saying that when it comes to Catullus, it's not the amatory poems that grip you most.
Right.
So which are they?
I mean, the one we're going to cover today has always been my favorite ones, and I love the some of the political ones. The way I'm fascinated by the way he deals with Caesar.
Right.
And I wonder, like, I read some of those poems and wonder, like, how did he not get into more serious trouble?
Yeah, because he always presented himself in a ridiculous pose, right? Like a contemporary comedian.
Right,
maybe.
I guess so. Yeah.
So on my YouTube channel for Latin Per Diem, I covered one of these poems, which is addressed to Caesar. I never cared much for you, Caesar. I don't care to know whether you're a white man or a dark man.
Yeah.
Right? And the way I interpret that is a pretty traditional interpretation, that he's thumbing his nose at Caesar. I care so little for you, so little about politics. I don't even care what you look like.
Yeah.
Or it could be that the light and the dark stand in for, I don't care whether you're a good man or a bad man.
I've also even read, I don't care whether we would say whether you're straight or gay.
Ah, so I haven't heard that
those
interpretation.
Terms are kind of, because he does go after Caesar's.
Yes.
The rumors about his sexual proclivities, right?
That's right. And so we have to talk a little bit about obscenity and profanity in this episode, not at length, but a little bit before we get on to Poem 101, which is just incredible.
Right.
But what characterizes the Neoteric poets of this era, Jeff? What would you say are some of their qualities?
I mean, they're certainly taking inspiration from Callimachus, right? Who is, which is also striking because Callimachus lives 200 years before these guys. Hellenistic poet who represents a sharp turn away from the long, the bombastic, the epic.
That's right.
And out of
his famous phrase that we've talked about before, but it bears repeating.
Yeah, make a big blow, make a cacon, right?
That's right.
Big book, big awfulness.
Big trouble.
Big trouble. And so there's a move away from the grand down to the small. Mm-hmm. And then there's also a turn away from, in many ways, the mythological towards the personal.
That's right.
And so, not that there are mythological themes in some of Catullus' poems. He talks about Peleus and Thetis and Ariadne and the like.
Yeah, in the Apilia, right? The mini epics that he wrote in the middle of the collection.
But it's much more about laying your personal soul bare.
Exactly.
Right? In a way that Homer, of course, he maintains a remove from the subject matter, but now the medium is the message.
That's correct.
Yes.
So you have to find some small element of your life that seems like it's not that significant. Mm-hmm. And you have to find the humor in it. You've got to find the morality in it sometimes.
Yes.
You have to find the drama, right? And this is what I think makes Catullus so appealing to moderns. Right. So we had a little refrigerator incident this week.
Are we back to the fridge over troubled waters again?
No,
troubled daughters.
Troubled daughters. No, but it's interesting.
Okay.
Now that I think about it, this is life imitating art. Because I did have a fridge problem this week.
What happened?
And the water line broke.
Oh.
Yeah, we're getting it fixed. And in fact, one of my daughters helped me. It's true. But let me get back to the point. Were I a Neoteric Roman poet, I would write a short poem about that incident.
Yeah. And
I would find deep levels of meaning out of something that's apparently trivial, right? Mm-hmm. So that's Alexandrian, that's Neoteric. A second element we want to add, I think, is what's called the labor limae, which, frankly, this really fascinated me in graduate school. Mm-hmm. So the labor limae is the work of the lime, right? The lima is the pumice stone that they would use to make corrections in the poetry. So you'd take this piece of pumice, and after you had written on the parchment, if you made a mistake, you'd scrub it off. And
your whiteout.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right. And so part of Alexandrian poetry was endless revision, right? And Conti talks about this, but endless revision. It's got to be just perfect.
Yep. Every syllable has to count.
That's right.
Yeah.
And again, that reminds me a little bit of some of the old-fashioned comedians and storytellers and folk artists, right? They speak in 100 different venues in the course of a year. They're using all the same material, but each time they're refining it a little bit so that it's that much closer to the bullseye.
Yes.
In terms of people's reaction.
Yes. The same thing I've heard comedians talk about refining a joke, right?
Exactly.
You go into the clubs to kind of test out material, and through that, so not one part of the joke is wasted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Timing, intonation, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a fridge over trebled daughters.
Exactly.
So that's the labor limae, and these are the hallmarks of Neoteric poetry.
Yeah. I was also thinking, I'm building off of that. I'm always looking for and thinking about what corollaries. Do we see similar kinds of shifts? And it struck me. So Debatin talks about how that one of the reasons it's this period, kind of roughly between the proscriptions of Marius and Sulla,
yes,
and the next wave of civil wars,
which was the triumvirate, right?
Triumvirate, right?
Caesar and Pompey.
There is a comparatively peaceful lull,
right?
It's not. I mean, you have Catiline in the middle of that, but
in 63,
right?
Yep.
But for the most part, it's
downtime.
It's downtime,
right.
And it allows perhaps for new art to flourish or to be you can get away with a bit more, perhaps,
because people aren't so tense about the long-term issues and problems. You think that's it?
I guess so, and it allows.
So like the Roaring '20s.
Or I was more thinking about how it reminded me of the period after World War II, and it's like during the 1950s and 60s where you get kind of the arrival of beat poetry.
Okay,
right. And
I don't know much about that.
Never read like On the Road, Jack Kerouac, or any of that stuff. Yeah.
I've successfessly avoided most of the 20th century.
Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Right. But also jazz is as the most kind of popular medium of music amongst the kids.
Yeah, so you have here on the script, as you're looking for some of these parallels, I like it, from big band to jazz.
Right.
So can you explain how you find a kind of doppelganger there to Neoteric poetry?
So big band in this case would be something more like epic poetry. And it's more structured. It follows more kind of accepted rules. And then you get the Neoterics where they kind of throw out the rule book. And I think even Debatin compares Catullus to a jazz artist and kind of his mastery of all these different rhythms and meters as such, and using them in kind of surprising and interesting ways, in a way that a jazz musician can go in and out of time signatures.
Right.
I like that. And the other thing that I thought that as if you think about artistic periods responding to previous artistic periods, the way that punk rock responds to prog rock.
Okay.
And so,
you got to define some terms here for the guy that missed the 20th century.
Right. So by the time you get into like the middle of the 1970s, you have bands like early Genesis or Yes, and they're writing these 17-minute complicated, kind of neoclassical pieces.
Right.
And it almost kind of becomes a parody of itself. And then the kind of the left turn response to this is the arrival of punk rock, where all you need are 3 chords and the truth, right? And it's anybody can do it, and so it's a radical kind of downsizing.
I see.
And that struck me. Okay, you're moving from Homer to a more Kalimikian aesthetic.
Right.
That I thought, that reminds me of something.
Okay. So the specific literary precedents to Catullus on the Roman scene were gentlemen like Plautus and Terence, right? I don't think we've ever done a Plauton episode, have we?
We should.
Yeah,
yes,
that's great stuff.
Yeah.
Plautus and Terence, the comedians of the beginning of the 2nd century BC.
Yeah.
I think Terence dies in 169. That's the date I have in my mind. Then you have some of those minor tragedians like Accius and Pacuvius.
Right.
The big epic name is
Ennius.
Yeah. Right. And then there's also, I don't know, Naevius and so forth. They're all dealing with heavily Roman things, right?
Right.
It's Greek Hellenistic themes, but they've been entirely Romanized, contextualized to some extent.
Right.
And Catullus, I guess, in the 116 poems we have, he doesn't really have the same interests. It's also personal.
Right. Exactly. So it's a radical departure in theme, right?
Right.
And so this is one thing I wanted to ask you about. I always learned that, there's kind of this general notion that it's in Ennius that we really first start to see Latin becoming an accepted literary language.
That's my understanding too, but it may go back as far as Andronicus.
Okay.
Livius Andronicus, it's around 240 BC.
Yeah.
But I love this quote from Ennius, which is taken from his Annales, 18 books, I think, his poem. Memini me fieri pavonem. I remember that I became a peacock.
That's great.
Isn't that fantastic?
Yes.
The way that wasn't, there's no context for it hardly at all.
That's even better.
Ennius exists only in fragments.
Yeah.
But the way it was explained to me, by the, Remains of Archaic Latin, that 2 little lobe volume.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that he's there tipping his hat to Homer, right? The peacock is the Homeric bird.
Gotcha.
And so he had this dream in which the muse said, "Hey, Ennius, you're the new Homer. Run with it." Right?
That's when he became a peacock.
So there he goes, right?
Right.
Catullus, he's got some epic themes, like you said, some mythology in the Apilia. I think it's poems 63 and 64. I can't remember exactly. But then there's these 2-line poems where he's talking about all kinds of salacious, really it's raunchy stuff.
It's the lines where the lobe translated into Italian.
Yeah, right? Or French, right? Yeah. Cobol or something, a Fortran.
Right.
But yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy, yeah.
Let's talk, before we get to the poem itself, a little bit about the collection as a whole, and then about some of our own first encounters with Catullus.
Sure.
So here I'm reading from Conte again. He says, "We have 116 poems of Catullus. More exactly, the number is 113, but the numeration reaches 116 because 3 Priapean poems, numbered 18 through 20, were inserted against the manuscript evidence by Moretus, a great French humanist of the 16th century. And they formed a part of the text of Catullus until in the 19th century, Lachmann, it's got to be German, banished them. The numeration of the individual poems was not changed, however. Totaling nearly 2,300 verses, Catullus's poems were collected in a liber that is customarily divided on the basis of meter into 3 sections. The first group, poems 1 through 60, is made up of generally brief poems of a light nature known as nougat.
Like the creamy nougat filling?
No.
Sorry.
No.
This is, okay. Trifles?
Trifles, yeah. Which would make a good name for a candy bar too, by the way.
Yes.
Bagatelles. These are in various meters, especially Phallacian hendecasyllabics, also iambic trimeters, skazons, and sapphics, named after, of course,
Sappho.
That's correct. For which reason they are called polymetrics. The elegiac couplet, in any event, does not appear. The second group, you want to take it up there, Jeff?
Sure. Second group, quite heterogeneous, includes a limited number of poems, but ones of greater extent and stylistic effort. The meters are various, including the unusual galliambic, glyconics, and Phaerecritians, hexameters, and pentameters. These are the so-called Carmina Docta, learned poems. The third section, 69 through 116, consists of generally short poems in elegiac couplets and the so-called epigrams. The question of the composition of the Catullan liber is controversial, although some attribute the ordering of the collection to the poet himself. The majority tend to believe, rightly, that this ordering, which is not by chronology or content, but only by meter, that is, by a criterion of philologists, is rather the work of others, carried out after the poet's death, when a posthumous edition of his poems was prepared. So, this is a long section, but did Conte mention that this survives basically in one manuscript?
Yes,
right?
That's right. The Veronese, I think. We're going to get to that at the end.
Okay.
When we talk about his Nachleben a little bit.
Yeah.
But before we go to the break, which is on its way up here, Jeff, can you remember your first exposure to Catullus as an undergrad or a grad student?
Yes.
Because it's quite bracing in some ways. But.
It is, yeah. No, I remember I encountered him as an undergraduate. I mean, it was not the focus of a seminar or anything. It was part of a broad kind of sampling of Latin literature and poetry. But I remember it was the "Give Me 1,000 Kisses" poem, and I remember at the time finding.
I think that's in Wheelock.
In Wheelock,
I think that poem is in Wheelock.
Maybe that's where I encountered just in an intro class, and I remember thinking I found it very charming.
Yeah,
and I remember it also struck me as like, wait a minute, this isn't what I expect
Latin to be,
or kind of ancient literature. I brought with it kind of those assumptions that everything's lofty, everything's Homeric.
Yeah,
and we had this very this love song,
right?
And I thought it was
dainty
great.
Almost.
Yeah. Well, no, what about you?
Well, I just wanted to say about that particular point, if I may, that this meme that goes the rounds on the internet about studying modern languages. How do I order a coffee and a Danish and so forth? And then the other is Latin. we killed 3,000 slaves and then we marched on to the capital. It's intending to show, obviously, the great difference between some of the themes of Latin literature and those of studying modern languages.
Right.
But it's mostly false.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, good point.
For reasons you just articulated.
Right.
So I first encountered him as an undergraduate as well, and I had a very, I would say, good upbringing in which I was, wisely, and to my mind, protected from too much salaciousness and gaudiness as a young child. I mean, you always get exposed to that later at some point, right? But my parents were careful with the kinds of things I had exposure to because I just think that's what parents tend to try to do, right? Was that similar for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I encountered Catullus, and I had the same kind of reaction that you did. This is really beautiful and so compelling. And some of this is really raunchy. I don't know what to do with it.
Indeed.
These are really adult themes. And then when I was in graduate school, I started reading a series of novels by a man named Stephen Saylor.
Oh yeah.
Do you know Stephen Saylor?
I think I've read one of those. Yeah. The Roman Mysteries.
That's correct. It's called the Roma Sub Rosa.
That's right.
Series, the Rome Under the Rose. It's a great premise. I think Gordianus is the anonymous character he invents, and then this Gordianus interacts with all the famous Romans.
And he's like a detective.
He's a detective.
Right.
He's a gumshoe, right? He's the Sherlock Holmes of ancient Rome. So when I was trying to avoid studying for my comprehensive exams, I read 6 or 7 of those in a row.
Yeah.
They were good at first. Catullus appears in the 1995 novel The Venus Throw, and they were like bubblegum kind of novels, right?
Yeah. But rooted in, I mean, it's historical fiction. He remains accurate to a certain degree.
Yes, it's well researched. There's a lot of accuracies. I kind of got tired of it after a while. It became a little repetitive.
Yeah. And
some of the themes were not really to my liking so much. So, I haven't read Saylor in a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not recommending him. I mean, not necessarily anyway. But that was kind of my entree into thinking about Catullus.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And every course I've taught on Catullus, I mean on Latin literature, you try to include a little bit of it.
Yeah.
Because it's so important.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's one of those that if you leave it out, it's incomplete.
Right. Yep. Like the famous Ode et Amo, I hate and I love.
Yes.
I feel it happening, and I don't know why, but it's torture.
It's torture.
Yep. Yeah. That's a great little poem.
Packed into 2 lines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of torture, it's time for the ads.
Let's do it. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by the good folks at Ratio Coffee. Dave, this morning I had my Ratio 8 ready to go.
The 8.
I had the 8, had the carafe in, I had the grounds all set to go, and all I had to do was step up and push one little button. It took me through the bloom stage, took me to the brew stage, and voila, before I knew it, it was ready.
Awesome.
Yep.
And then when you got to the office, you brewed up in the 4?
I didn't today, but that's my usual.
Decided to moderate your coffee consumption.
I was running a little late.
Down to 2 gallons.
Exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, usually the practices get to office, and I brew it up with my 4.
It's sweet, isn't it?
I want one everywhere I go.
Yes, yeah. I love it. I love my Ratio 4, which I'm primarily brewing with now. I still have the 8, keeping it in some storage, but I know when I take it out, it's not going to be a squirty plastic experience.
Of course not.
It's going to be a beautiful work of art.
Right.
So, listener, you would like to score one of these great Ratio coffee machines like the 4, which we just sent out to our contest winner.
That's right.
Joanna in Colorado.
Fantastic.
It's on its way. Go to ratiocoffee.com/adnauseam. Don't forget the V.
Yep.
Check out the wide selection of great machines, and then you're going to want to enter this coupon code at checkout. It's AN.
AN.
There you go.
AN.
Ratio 2025. Okay.
AN Ratio 2025.
Nice.
Okay, now I got it.
And what does that get them?
That will get them $20 off their entire order.
All right, check it out. Ad Nauseam listeners, we're pleased to announce a new sponsor. We'd like you to meet our friend Della Chelpka. So, ready for art that truly speaks to your story? Meet Della, a Tucson-based oil painter who captures the people, places, and moments you cherish with breathtaking detail. She's showcased her work in multiple galleries, illustrated books, and is often commissioned for standout projects. See her current works for sale at her website, delachelpka.art. Jeff, can you spell that, please?
Yes, DELLACHELPKA.art.
Yes, find your inspiration. Visit delachelpka.art and use this coupon code. You ready? It's Apelles. Apelles, the most famous painter of antiquity.
Indeed, yes.
Apelles, Apelles, and you will receive a special ad nauseum discount of
10% off.
Yes, we had the pleasure of recording a very short interview with our friend Della, and so here it goes. All right, so thank you so much for agreeing to meet with us. This is my friend Jeff, and Della, we met before.
Nice to meet you, Della.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah, so we're really excited that we get to promote your artwork. I am a great fan. And could you tell us a little bit about your development and background as an artist as we introduce you to our audience?
Sure. I have always been an artist, I think. I was a very observant child, and I always wanted to draw and paint. But I've also always been a musician. So I actually studied music in college, taking art commissions on the side and that sort of thing. I'd say I've always been a student of beauty and the arts. In high school, I started really getting more into painting and taking on commissions. And my aunt is actually a professional artist, Karen Barton. She's been a big inspiration of mine as well.
Okay.
So I haven't really pursued it career-wise until maybe 5 years ago. I started to go deeper into it.
Now, you're a voice teacher, right? Are you a soprano?
I'm a soprano, yeah.
Yeah. So could you also tell us a little bit, please, about how you approach painting? Not how you approach the canvas itself in a physical sense, but the process of painting.
Yeah, sure. I definitely want to highlight those things that we don't often see right away, like you see things every day that you don't notice the beauty of. And those little moments that catch your eye. Oh, wow, that's really beautiful. Those are the things I try to take and put into a painting. So you'll often find high amounts of detail in my work. Or like if I do a sunset, sunsets are really quick. You don't get to sit and observe it for hours. It's just one, fleeting moment. And I like to take that moment and capture it in kind of a timeless way.
That's wonderful. I'm curious. So you mentioned your aunt. Are there any other particular artists or artistic traditions that you find particularly meaningful or inspiring?
Realism and conveying the fine details of things. I find that very, very good.
Yeah. So, Della, what message would you like to communicate to those who are considering purchasing one of your paintings? What would you say? Because a lot of people, maybe they're not familiar with the concept of buying art.
Well, I think a lot of people already are art collectors in a way. And I mean that by, let's say you're buying a car, you're going to choose one color over another or one particular little design. You're going to spend extra money on that. Why? Because you enjoy looking at it. It adds something to your life. Also, I think having something real is really important. And not just something you're going to scroll through. Why would you go to a concert as opposed to just listening to a recording, right? It's the same thing having an original work of art in your home. You're going to see the brush strokes. You're going to see the paint as in full color, just like you would hear an orchestra in full volume. It's the same kind of thing. And I would tell people, try it. Try a gateway piece of art and just see how it sits with you in your home. I've never had a disappointed client. They all have been pleased to have my artwork in their home. So I would say just give it a try and see how it sits with you.
Well, thank you so much, Della. Jeff, do you have any other questions for Della as we introduce her to our audience? We have a coupon code coming up and we'll send all the listeners to her website.
Yeah. Well, we'll mention your contact information on air, but maybe you could just tell us yourself. If people are interested in your art, how should they go about finding it?
Yeah, just go to delachelpka.art. And everything that is for sale is up there. You can also go to my Instagram to kind of follow processes and that sort of thing. And that is also at delachelpka.art. Go there, check it out. There's a lot there right now, and I've got things in the works that I'm really excited about. So just go and keep an eye on what's progressing.
Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic.
Yes, that was nice, wasn't it?
Yes. So listeners, please do yourself a favor. Check it out. She's got some amazing stuff. And this episode is also brought to you by who's our guy? Hackett Publishing.
Hackett.
Man, I got coming off vacation. My brain is turned to fog.
Yeah, it's all that Hocking Hills.
It is all that Hocking Hills. Yes. But yes, no, Hackett Publishing. We love these guys. They've been with us since the beginning of this podcast, almost 5 years now.
That's right.
And they've got their offices in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Indianapolis, Indiana. They've been around for 54 years, and one of these wonderful companies that is keeping the flame of knowledge and wisdom in the classics alive.
That's right.
Dave, what do you like about Hackett?
I like the breadth of their collection. I like the depth of the research that goes into the translations. Mm-hmm. I like the affordability. There's really nothing about Hackett thus far that I don't like.
Right.
I've been very pleased with them as a publisher of this kind of material.
Yes. And so listeners, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you love your books, you love your personal library. If you want to expand it in an impressive but also affordable way, go to HackettPublishing.com. That's HACKETT Publishing.com. Check out their wide selection of things from the classical world, but well beyond that as well.
That's right.
Find the works that you want, put them in a little grocery basket, and if you type in this coupon code, Dave, what do we got?
We have AN and then the current year 2025.
Yes.
That will get you what?
That will get you two wonderful things. That will get you 20% off your entire order and free shipping.
Yeah, so this is what I envision, Jeff.
Yes.
You wake up in the morning, you brew something in your ratio 6 or your ratio 4, you get a nice hot cup of joe.
Indeed.
You go to your favorite spot in your house or on your deck or out in your yard. You sit down. Maybe not in the yard, but in your house, there on the wall is your lovely painting by Della.
Yes.
Of something that's near and dear to you. And in your hand, there is a volume from Hackett.
Man, that's the trifecta right there.
That's it, isn't it?
Indeed.
Check them out. All right, Jeff, as we resume now our discussion of all things Catullus, are we ready for the poem itself?
I think we're getting there, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Any more setup you want to do?
Well, we've set the stage and we have explained a little bit of Catullus's biography, either Gaius or Quintus Valerius Catullus.
Yes.
He comes from Cisalpine Gaul, from Verona, right? One gentleman from Verona,
right?
If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And we have talked about what it means to be a Neoteric poet.
Yep.
Small themes, carefully and endlessly reworked, looking for the drama and the morality and the passion in the mundane.
Right, right. And this poem we're about to go through, this is one that I would have a hard time finding any kind of sarcasm.
Oh, no.
This seems very, very personal and very, very real.
That's correct. Right? Yeah, this is to my mind, my favorite poem of antiquity, hands down. I can't think of anything that compares with it.
So not just favorite Catullan poem, but favorite of all time.
It's thus far.
Okay. Yeah.
It's really, I don't know. There's something odd about trying to compare, say, the Iliad with its 24 books or the Odyssey, right?
Right.
To a poem that is, what is it?
10 lines long.
10 lines long. Yeah. It's that seems odd, right?
Yeah.
But it just, as the kids say, it hits different, right?
Sure.
There's just really something about it that's overwhelming.
Certainly, and as you mentioned at the top of the show, you're looking at the anniversary of your own mother's death. And
that's correct.
It has a particular poignancy for you.
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah.
Yep. So the title of the poem, Jeff.
Yes. Ad inferias.
Ad inferias. Yeah. To the dead, right? To the shades below. And as a reference point here, we're going to look at Daniel Garrison, his Students Catullus. This is published by University of Oklahoma Press in 1995. And this was my entree to the poem, you might say. And he says, Catullus's brother died somewhere near Troy. And it is likely that on his way to Bithynia in 57, the poet, Catullus, stopped to make an offering at the grave. Mm-hmm. This memorial of his visit is written in the manner of a Hellenistic grave epigram.
Ah, okay.
So Catullus is following an established genre.
Right.
And the epigram is written in elegiac couplets.
Right.
So you've got one line of hexameter, which is the meter of Homer, Virgil, Ovid, Apollonius.
Yep.
And then the second line is a pentameter, or two half lines stitched together.
Right. Excellent. So do you want to, why don't you read this poem for us?
Okay. You want me to read the whole thing?
Yes, read the whole thing.
All right.
And then I'll dive in with the translation.
Excellent. It's so beautiful. It would sound something like this. Multas per gentes et multa per aequor vectus, ad venias miserdras, frater ad inferias, ut te postremo donar remunera mortis, et muta nequi, qua locurer cinerem, quando quidem fortuna mehi te tabstulit ipsum, hel miser indigna, frater edempte mehi, nunc tamen inter dreaic prisco quae mordra parentum, tradita sunt tristi, munerdra ad inferias, accipe frater no multum manantia fletu, atque perpetuum, frater avat que vale.
Very nicely done.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I will offer the translation. This
Excellent.
Is from A.S. Klein, from his Poetry in Translation website. Carried over many seas and through many nations, brother, I come to these sad funeral rites to grant you the last gifts to the dead, and speak in vain to your mute ashes, seeing that fate has stolen from me your very self. Ah, alas, my brother, taken shamefully from me, yet by the ancient custom of our parents, receive these sad gifts, offerings to the dead, soaked deeply with a brother's tears, and for eternity, brother, hail and farewell.
Very nice. So Klein entitles this poem Ave atque Vale, an offering to the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it is in, as you said, 10 lines, 5 couplets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first line, multas per gentes et multa per aequora, through many nations and across many seas, I come to these sad inferias. And then in the second line, let's see, there's the vocative frater, where he speaks to his brother.
Mm-hmm.
We see it again in what would be line 6, hel miser indigne, frater adempte mehi. And then we see it in the very last line again, the vocative frater.
Right, and also a repetition of the ad inferias.
Yes, that's right.
Towards the beginning and towards the end.
Yes,
Yep.
line 2 and line 8. Sure. So for those who maybe aren't up on the study of Latin, the vocative case, as in Greek, is the case that's used when you want to speak to someone. Mm-hmm. And it's different than the normal case, you might say, the nominative, when the noun is simply the subject. So I'm not sure what it is that moves me so deeply about this poem. I guess it's the sadness of Catullus standing at his brother's grave when he himself is a very young man.
Mm-hmm.
If this is 57, what is he? 27 years old?
Right, exactly.
28, maybe?
And very likely near death himself.
Exactly,
Yeah.
although he doesn't know it.
Yeah.
The commentators on the poem, they mention the number of consonants in the last 2 lines, that they imitate the sound of weeping. Accipe frater no multum manantia fletu. There's what we call here a chiasmus, that we have fraterno, and then a multum manantia. Fraterno beginning with an F, multum manantia, 2 sounds, and then fletu afterward at the end.
Yeah.
So not only these 3 instances of the word frater as he's speaking to his brother, but we also have fraterno fletu.
Yes.
Well, a reference to himself. So brotherly weeping or brotherly tears.
Yeah. I find particularly moving about the whole poem. He's speaking to his brother, but right. In line 4,
yep.
he says, "Oh, I'm just talking to mute ashes.
Exactly.
I'm speaking to someone who can't talk back."
Yes.
Yeah.
Mutam cinerem, mute ash, like you said, and he does it nequiquam, in vain, to no purpose.
Right. And that's at odds. Clearly he's there. Family, personal obligations. He sees a vast importance in what he's doing.
Right.
But there's that line about the mute ashes, the nequiquam. There's this nagging sense that what's it?
Right.
It's all
futility.
It's all futile. Yeah.
It's a beautiful poem. I don't know what the best translation of it has ever been. I'm not sure how one would even judge that.
Yeah.
Many, many years ago, and I won't mention this student's name, although I remember her. Many, many years ago, one of my students had lost someone very close to her while she was a student, and she translated this poem. And I wish I could find her translation, because she was a very gifted young woman, and she did an excellent job. And it was so meaningful to hear her translation of this.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe that phenomenon. I guess Aristotle would say it's catharsis, maybe.
Yeah.
where you use someone else's literary production as a way to understand your own experience.
Sure, right. Yeah, I think that I've encountered that same kind of thing in the use of a prayer book, right? And when you can't distill the words yourselves,
right?
Read the moving experience and petition of another can be very, very powerful.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to think that the person who writes a prayer book, or if we take the Psalms of the Hebrew Scriptures as an example,
exactly,
there's something so incredible about the in situ expression of deep emotion, like David in Psalm 51 when he's talking about his, being caught with Bathsheba, or in Psalm 130 when he's talking about being pulled out of the depths. And yet, that in some ways it's not just the emotion that poured out at the moment, but it has been worked over carefully and artistically and poetically,
right?
Like this beautiful poem, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not getting the first take; you're getting something that's polished, and yet it still has the sense of immediacy.
Yeah,
I don't know how to describe that.
Yeah, no, this makes me think of my favorite songs, right? Even pop songs that are meaningful to me, or that they're written from a specific experience of that artist, but that ability to kind of make them universal at the same time is extraordinary.
It is, yeah. And I guess one of the reasons I love this poem so much is that to me it encapsulates so much of the ancient Roman and Greek perspective on the world. I know there's a danger when you are popularizers like ourselves to conflate and collapse things that are really more sophisticated.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
To fail to distinguish.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when you say the Greek or Roman perspective, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but generally speaking, you have such depth of emotion here in what Catullus says to his brother, because it's universal. Everyone loses loved ones, but there's nothing here about the afterlife.
Yeah.
There's nothing here about what lies beyond the grave.
Yeah.
And for me, that's really emblematic of my takeaway from studying Greek and Roman literature. The sense that I learned so much about the human experience, but I am always left empty by it.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Completely. It's that kind of stuff always makes me think of Odyssey Book 11.
Yeah.
Where, Odysseus encounters the ghost of Achilles, and he comes to these assumptions that, well, you were the greatest among us up here, so clearly that's true down here. And Achilles says, no, I'd rather be the lowliest slave alive than king over all of this. There's that staring into the void.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the very poignant scene where he meets his mother. As Anticlea, right?
Yep.
And he learns that she has committed suicide in his absence. And he doesn't know that until he meets her in the underworld.
Right.
It's so gripping.
It is gripping.
But no hope.
But no hope, right?
This last line, atque perpetuum, and forever, brother, hail and farewell.
Yeah.
Right? It's ultimately, I don't want to make a pious juke here.
Yeah.
It's ultimately, and no surprise, deeply unchristian.
Oh, right. Yeah,
right?
Yes.
Because as Christians, we believe in the next life and in the resurrection, specifically of the body. And yet, other than that crucial and all-important aspect, the poem is so excellent.
Yeah.
Right? It's so gripping.
It's deeply human.
Yes.
This also reminds me, so this past fall, I took a handful of students to the Kelsey Museum at the University of Michigan, right?
For the papyri, right?
We went to the papyri, and then went to the Archaeological Museum. And as you go up the stairs to the second level, the wall is covered with these funeral plaques.
Right.
And I was standing there with my students, and translating some of this. And I remember one of the students says, "Wow, this makes it real."
Yeah.
Right. And you see
these were real people.
These are real people
with real sorrows.
You see the humanity in these texts that they lost their little boy, and the Latin inscription tells like how many years and days they lived, right? Yep. And so this is so deeply human,
right,
and immediate in a way that, I mean, the death and funeral of Hector is very moving, but there's something so immediate, and personal about this that takes it to another level.
And I think it's that is very well said, Jeff. I think it's the scale of the poem
Yeah.
That labor limai, right? The work of revision. He has crammed into these 10 lines a world of feeling.
Yes. Yeah.
In a kind of a miniature, right? It's like a ship in a bottle.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if you've ever been next to a massive boat. I mean, I haven't, one that has sails and all that kind of stuff. Just the cruise ship. But you take that massive thing and you stuff it into a little bottle.
Right.
The scale has changed, but the detail is supposed to be extensive and extraordinary.
Yes.
That seems to me like what this poem is.
Yes, indeed.
All this emotion, but compressed.
Right. Another corollary would be maybe something like the Gettysburg Address.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
We've talked about this.
Yes, we have. But as an example of epideictic oratory.
Right. And I think isn't the story there that Lincoln followed some guy who spoke for like 2 hours, right? Yeah. And he comes up with his...
Well, this was in our discussion of Carl Richard.
That's what it was.
The golden age of the classics in America.
Right.
So, listener, if you haven't read this poem, if you're unfamiliar with it, we'll leave a link to Klein's translation. To my knowledge, Hackett doesn't have this in their collection, but if I'm mistaken, I'll find it and we'll make that available as well.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, what about some closing reflections and what kind of influence did Catullus have?
Well, should we? This is you got some copy here. This is also from Conte.
That's correct.
Let me read a little bit of this. He writes that individually and in groups, Catullus' poems circulated among his friends during his lifetime, but the collection that has reached us was probably published posthumously and may also reflect an editor's arrangement and divisions. It achieved a vast and immediate success among cultivated Latin readers. In particular, it exercised a profound influence upon the Augustan poets, with the exception of Horace. Not only the elegists, but who regard Catullus as one of their most important literary ancestors, but also the Virgil of the Eclogues and the Dido episode slip irresistibly into the language of Catullus, especially that of Ariadne, when they combine erotic passion with refined diction and Baroque style. So he kind of paved the way for the so-called, I guess, golden age of Latin poetry, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about later on? What happened later down the line with Catullus?
Right. Well, we move into the Middle Ages. Still here quoting from Conte. In the Middle Ages, on the other hand, Catullus seems to have been known scarcely, if at all. Mm-hmm. The echoes that have been noticed in writers from the 8th through the 12th century, such as Paulus Diaconus, Hieric of Auxerre, and William of Malmesbury, are rare, faint, and probably indirect. Isidore of Seville quotes him in the 7th century, but then he is not mentioned again until 966. When Bishop Rather of Catullus' own hometown of Verona discovered a manuscript that contained his poems and reproached himself for occupying himself day and night with Catullus' poetry, which he had not known before. Yes, parts of Catullus definitely that will do that to you.
Yeah.
Bishop Rather's manuscript promptly vanished again for another 3.5 centuries and did not reappear until shortly after 1300, still in Verona. Benvenuto de Campesianus celebrated the discovery as the poet's resurrection from the dead, and in fact, the Veronese Codex is the sole source of all surviving manuscripts.
That's what we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Had it been lost, the only poem of Catullus that might have survived, to give us some idea of his qualities, is poem 62, which was also preserved in the Florilegium Tuanaeum, a 9th century French miscellany.
Man.
So he barely escaped antiquity.
Barely. Yeah, that's incredible.
The well worth reading.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and so we have him today.
We do,
listeners, if you are completely new to this, if you've never heard of Catullus before, he is well worth checking out.
Yes, if you're of a certain age,
with caution, caution. Right.
Some parts are PG-13, some parts are XXX. Yes. Honestly, but not poem 101.
No. No.
Breathtakingly beautiful.
Right. And so, I envision us in a later episode of tackling a few more of the poems.
For sure.
And taking them apart.
For sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
But, Dave,
yes,
we're up against it.
We are. We have to get out of here for no particular reason?
No. It's all quiet.
All quiet on the... actually, it is the Western Front.
It is. Exactly.
But out we go. We have some people to thank.
Yes. Mishka, as always, our wonderful engineer. Can't thank her enough for the great work that she does.
And she's juggling a number of different things today. She's putting in some new intro and outro music.
That's right.
She's putting in the new sponsor, Della Chelpka, and her art. Yep. And we got someone new to thank.
Who's this?
This is Jeff Sheets.
Of course.
Remember?
That's right.
The
guy,
fabulous guitarist.
That's the music that you hear at the beginning of it.
Yeah, so Jeff is a Kansas City guitarist. He has released 18 CDs and also recorded 6 complete guitar instructional video courses.
Fantastic.
Yeah, probably nothing that you could learn from him, Jeff. I don't know, but
I think I could learn a lot.
You think so?
Absolutely.
Just from one Jeff to another?
Exactly.
He also is a very accomplished disc dogger. Did you know this?
What is that?
Why do you sound so skeptical?
A disc dogger? Like he has dogs that catches frisbees?
Oh, yes, that's what it is.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, he's a world champion. One of his dogs, Towser, is a world champion disc catching dog.
Oh, my goodness.
He goes from place to place. They have these rodeos, and they play disc dog or dog disc. I don't know.
Man.
Jeff is really excellent at this.
Fantastic.
And, he and I have been off and on acquaintances for actually 30 years, and I hit him up, as they say, and I said, Jeff, could we use some of your fantastic music to spice up the podcast a little bit? And he said, go right ahead. Hope you enjoy it.
So generous.
Yes. Right? So if you want to check out some of his stuff, go to jeffsheets.com, SCHEETZ.com. We need to thank Ken Tamplin for the bumper music that is around the ads. Anybody else?
No, I think that does it for this.
Does that pretty much do it?
Yeah. How about if our listeners want to learn some Latin or Greek, though? What should they do?
They should go to latinperdiem.com and check out one of my intro courses that takes you ab initio, from the ground up. You can learn Roma in Italia est, etc. Eventually, in fact, in just maybe a little more than a year, you can read Catullus.
Fantastic.
With some help. You want to study Greek? I think the sweet spot for my Greek instruction is those who have been to seminary or didn't get to go to seminary, but they have a little bit of exposure to Greek. What they're missing is depth and confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I can provide that.
Excellent.
Through my Moss program with the Moffus Hours every Friday.
Excellent. So latinperdiem.com.
That's correct. Yep. And here is a coupon code. The coupon code is 10+. 10PLUS. 10 plus gets you 10% off anything on the site.
Sounds great. Hey, listeners, if you want a shout out, if you have a question, you want to suggest an episode, do not hesitate to contact us. You can contact Dave at adnauseam.com. Don't forget that V.
Or Jeff. You want to get in touch with Jeff and ask him about Hocking Hills. That's Jeff at adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V. Are you a spokesman for the Hocking Hills?
I could easily be one now.
You had such a great time.
It was wonderful.
All right.
Fantastic.
Pick yourself up a shirt, a hat, a Quai Nocent, Docent t-shirt to show that you are taking in the classics.
And keeping them down.
And Jeff, what do we have for next week? What are you thinking?
It looks like you went ahead and
well, you're not supposed to tell the audience that. It's just a suggestion.
Right. No, this is a great idea.
Okay.
So we are going to cover. I like this one. You gave me a couple options to work with. Dennis R. McDonald's Does the New Testament Imitate Homer?
Yes. Now this is a monograph.
Okay.
It's a big book.
It is.
So it's not going to be a big evil. But he has 4 different case studies. Does the New Testament imitate Homer?
Okay.
And I don't know whether it's going to be a resounding yes or a no way or somewhere in between.
Okay.
But let's give it a look for next week.
Sounds great. And Dave, you have our gustatory parting shot.
I do. This comes from the great L. Frank Baum. In his work, The Scarecrow of Oz.
Oh, is that one of those that nobody reads?
I've never read it, so
I stopped with the wizard.
Yeah, there's an N of 1, as they say.
Yeah.
The Scarecrow of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Now, anytime you quote the Scarecrow in an argument, you have the risk of making him into a straw man, you might say.
Nicely done.
All right, but here's what he has to say. If I'm going to starve, I'll do it all at once, not by degrees.
Nicely done. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.